the 4 disciplines of converting strategic intent into operational reality. So we've got about an hour today. And what I'm going to try and give you is lots of practical tools and techniques to help you do this. It really, for me, is one of the most critical issues as to what makes the difference between success or failure, or success and mediocre performance. I suppose I should take you back, really, probably a year or so ago now, when I was doing like a Dragon's Den. I was one of the funders on one of the Dragon's Den, and I was accompanied by a very experienced VC. And one of the new businesses that came in front of us, I thought was pretty good, and I was going to give them sort of some money. And the chap next to me was like, no. I said, "Why? That is a fantastic strategy, and all seemed brilliant." And he turned around to me and he said, "Steve, I'd rather invest in an A-grade team with a C-grade idea than an A-grade idea with a C-grade team. Success doesn't necessarily come from a brilliant strategy or a great innovation, but from flawless execution." Or as Andy Grove, the chap who drove the successful strategy at Intel, said, it almost doesn't matter what you know. Execution is what matters most. And I guess that's it, really, isn't it? That's what we're going to be covered today, because just like Premiership football managers, we're not judged as leaders or as people in business on what we've done. We're actually judged on what we achieved. Like football managers, we're judged on our results. But what is execution? So for me, execution is that gap between setting objectives and delivering results. It's the conversion of strategic intent into an operational reality. It's that bit of implementation that happens at the next level. It's the discipline, art, and science of getting stuff done. And we all know that as leaders and as people working in high growth businesses, that's the thing. That's what we've got to do. We've got to get stuff done. But there's an art and a science to it. And what we're going to cover today are the 4 disciplines that I believe are the key to getting stuff done. What is execution? Well, what should it mean? Well, if you accept my definition of what execution is, then execution is the tilting point issue for your business this year. It's the best vehicle for you to coach other people in your team on. And it's the fairest way to appraise performance, both of yourself and also that of people in your team. That's what it is for me. That is execution. And what we're going to be looking at is that gap in execution, translating the top line goals into the front line actions. That is what execution is. So what I'm going to do is going to start with a bit of a question, I guess 5 questions for you, just to get you in that context of what execution problem, challenge have you got right now? And we're going to have a look at that today. So what I want you to think about is, tell me, are you thinking about your execution challenge in terms of yourself, in terms of you need to execute on something and you're struggling? Is it someone else in your team that you're trying to help them with execution? Or is it the business? I know some of you are here as leaders of businesses. So are you looking for your business to execute more effectively? So have a think about that. Then just very quickly, what's the one thing that I'm doing or my business is currently doing that's really struggling to execute on? And yet by doing it, I know it would turbocharge our growth. So just scribble down a piece of paper. What would you say is the one big issue at the moment that you're really struggling, your business, someone who you work with is really struggling to execute on? What is it? Is it generating new leads? Is it improving productivity? Is it recruiting staff? Cutting energy costs? What is it? So once you've just had a chance to think about that one issue, I want you to try and, I guess, articulate for me what is happening or not happening. So is it a case of, if you're trying to generate inquiries, is it a case of we should be generating more sales inquiries, or if it's productivity, we should be getting this many parts per million, or if it's to do with recruiting, it's the fact that we should have recruited 2 people and we've only got 1 person. Or can you make that real for me? What's the performance gap? So you've defined, first of all, what the issue is. It could be sales or new product development or something like that. The second one is actually what's happening or not happening. So what's that person or that issue? What's happening that should be happening or not happening that should be happening? Third little question I want you to think about is, to what degree is this objective something that you're responsible for or accountable for making happen, or someone else? So if it's the fact that you're looking at it from a business lens and you're looking at your business strategy, you're saying sales aren't where they should be, an inquiry should be 6 a month, and at the moment they're 1 a month. To what degree is that your responsibility as the salesperson, or is it someone else? Fourth question, to what degree are you proactively working on a documented recovery plan with a clear dashboard that drives actions, keeps scores, gets us back on track? So you've got an issue. You might have a handle on the performance gap, difference from where you are, where you should be. You might know who it should be. But are you actually working on a documented recovery plan to get us back on track? And does that incorporate some sort of dashboard? Fifth, to what degree is the person responsible truly held accountable for implementing this plan and achieving the outcomes? So if it's you, honestly, are you held accountable for not being on target? Are you held accountable for not having a plan to get us back on track? Or maybe it's somebody else in your team. How do you hold them accountable? Is it a case of, well, we're all busy, etc. Don't worry about it. See what happens next week, next month. Are we accepting underperformance as our culture? So 5 quick questions there. And the reason for asking those is just to get you, I guess, focused in on what we're trying to do today. Because every business has a bad hair day. We're all working on projects and issues and things, and there's always loads of stuff to do. I get it. But today is about focusing on maybe just one thing that the issue is with your business or with you personally. What's happening, not happening? To what degree are you responsible? Are we working on a recovery plan? I mean, if we haven't got a recovery plan, then how on earth are we trying to get back on target? To what degree is that person responsible and how accountable? So I thought I'd just sort of put some context on what we're covering today. So why don't important things get done? Let's have a quick little look at video.
He never thought execution would be so difficult. After all, the people in his organization work for him. Nobody else is paying them. When he was in business school, they never even studied execution. They studied strategy. He's been into his plan almost a year. And if he's honest with himself, not much has really changed. So why does this always feel so much harder than it ought to? Because of the enormous amount of energy required to maintain the operation, the day job, what we call the whirlwind, will suffocate the activities needed to execute on the strategy. Think about the strategies that you've seen fail. How do they die? Do they come crashing down with a loud noise, or do they die slowly, quietly smothered by the day job? You see, his people aren't stupid or lazy or defiant. The problem is they are busy with what they call the real work. He has also made the mistake, like most creative, ambitious leaders, of trying to pursue too many goals at the same time. And as the numerous priorities become jumbled within the whirlwind, his people lose sight of where they stand. They measure everything, but the numbers are after the fact, lag measures. He feels like he's driving a car by looking out the rearview mirror. His managers spend their days either battling the whirlwind or praying over lag measures. So his people return to their day job, Having lost sight of the strategy, they are clearly playing not to lose rather than playing to win. Actually, he is not a bad leader, but he is losing to the whirlwind, and it is his fault. There are rules for executing in the face of the whirlwind, and unknowingly he is ignoring those rules. But they're not ignoring him. There are rules for executing in the face of the whirlwind. 4 of them, to be exact.
Four rules of the whirlwind. And I guess what I should say, first of all, is I guess most of us can relate to that whirlwind that's going on at the moment. And maybe some of you are even thinking about it right now in your business. Park that for now. The whirlwind is there, but there are 4 disciplines to withstand. First one we're going to talk about is about narrowing your focus to what's wildly important. The second one, as we're going to cover today, is convert those lofty whats into doable hows. Third discipline, keeping a compelling scoreboard with leading and lagging measures. Fourth one is creating a culture of accountability. So those are our 4 disciplines we're going to cover today. And we're going to go through these reasonably quickly. But what I'm hoping for is that you'll maybe see 1 or 2, 3, 4, just even if it's one idea that you can take to help you deliver successfully and execute with ease. Discipline 1. Okay, let's go. Narrow your focus onto your wildly important goals. So sometimes when I'm taking into businesses on this topic of execution, I'll ask the MD, what's the most important goal or goals for your business this year? And they'll say, whoa, it's a bit difficult. I say, okay, what do you think the wildly important goals are for your business this year? And they say, oh, well, it's difficult, really. We've got this to do, got that to do, got the other to do. And it just goes on for like 15 minutes. Not clear, not measurable, just a bit of a diatribe. And I think for you, if you're in that leadership position, you should be able to articulate very clearly and very succinctly what the goals are for that business, for your business. I think it's on your job description. You should be able to do it. What's more worryingly is then quite predictably, if I go out onto the shop floor of that business and say to people, what do you think the most important thing for this business to do is this year? They have no idea. I go back to the management team and ask them. They have got no idea either. What we want is clarity, focus. Because if we don't know what we're really trying to go for, then how on earth are we going to get there? Extraordinary results are directly determined by how narrow you can make the focus. You think about really great companies like Starbucks, they're really good at one thing. It's kind of coffee and a few biscuits, yeah? If you think about great sports people, they're really, really good at one particular event. What about you? What about your business? Most people believe actually the opposite's true. They think to have a super growth business, you must think wide and complex and have lots of things to your game in order to grow your business. I say you need to be doing fewer things that have greater effect rather than more things that just have side effects. Now, to trial this out, I went to visit an air traffic controller a few years ago to really, I guess, just to sort of sound out this idea of, narrowing your focus. How do you narrow your focus when you've got lots to do? Just like an air traffic controller. I remember chatting to one of the air traffic controllers and I said, look at that screen at the moment. There's all sorts of stuff on there. How do you narrow your focus? How do you decide what's important here? Because they're all important, obviously. And I remember her saying to me, Steve, what do you think the focus, what's my role as air traffic controller? So I thought for a minute and said, well, I don't know, stopping the planes from crashing. And she said, no, that's maybe. But she said, actually, my role is to land one plane at a time safely and then quickly go on to the next one. And she pointed at the screen and said, all these planes are very important, particularly if it's got one of your relatives on. They're all important. But right now, this one's the most important. I'm going to land one plane at a time narrowing your focus, narrowing your focus. I use the word wildly important because for me, you know, we can all have a conversation about your business strategy or the person who you're trying to help to execute on something, and there'll be lots of things that are important, and that's the problem. The problem is small businesses that are trying to grow, there's always loads of stuff. What I want you to think about is what's wildly important. So the achievement of any other goal is actually pretty inconsequential compared to if we don't achieve the wildly important goal. So we call these wigs sometimes. Narrowing the focus. I've got a friend, a consultancy of mine. He's involved with construction companies, and he takes photos of construction sites, particularly housing, where jobs have not been done quite right. And he uses this phrase a lot, but I know some of the younger people in my family use, which is, seriously? You had one job to do. And he goes around taking pictures of this to give himself some mild amusement. But, you know, when you've given someone one job to do, that's all they had to do for that day, then it's a bit frustrating when you can see the fact that they completely messed it up. One job to do. And I think part of the cynicism in the phrase, you had one job, we can also turn to ourselves when we think about narrowing the focus. So think about you in your role, or maybe the person you're trying to help to execute. What would you say for you, for example, is the one job you're employed to do this year? So if I was a major shareholder in your business, what would you tell me your one job to do was? It's probably pretty high level. Could you be criticized for not consistently delivering on that? So if you're an MD, is your one job to grow the business? If you're a salesperson, is it about generating inquiries or conversion? If you're a production person, is it about making sure that we get the widgets out the door on time, to quality, to satisfaction? One job. How would you define your one job? If somebody sarcastically was to say, what's your one job? You had one job to do. Are you doing it? And do you know what and how to define that? Now, I know what many people are going to say. Steve, you don't realize how busy I am, Steve, at the moment. I'm really, really busy. There's busy, and then there's super busy, and then there's what I am at the moment. I'm really busy. I just don't have the time. I don't have enough time. I get that a lot, and I understand it. What I would say is, it's not so much, well, let's put it this way. You have exactly the same number of hours per day, days in the week, weeks in the year, as Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Mother Teresa, Richard Branson, Serena Williams, whoever's been successful. You've got exactly the same amount of time as those people. And they did fantastic things, achieved wonderful things. So the challenge I would give back to you is, actually, you've got the same amount of time as everybody else has got. And time management, you know, you can't manage time. That is kind of, you've got what you've got. You've got 1,440 minutes between now and tomorrow this time. Everybody's got that. So it's not so much about the fact you don't have enough time. I would suggest, and I would challenge you on how you are spending your time. Where do you focus your time? I mean, if we go with the 1,440 minutes from now until tomorrow this time, then that equates to about 96 15-minute blocks of time to do every day. 96 15-minute blocks. So how do you spend those blocks? And sometimes we work with business and leaders to block those 15 minutes off. Quite interesting. One 15-minute block is about 1% of your day. So if it's about focusing on how we spend that time, then, and I know many of you are familiar with this model, but it's an interesting model, a very good model. And the more I get into this, the more I really believe in it. It is the Pareto analysis. So Italian economist who found out that 80% of the wealth in Italy was driven by 20% of the people. And some people would say in the UK, maybe it's even worse at the moment, but let's not go there. But basically is that 80% of your time generates about 20% of the results, and vice versa. So what we've got to do is think about that 20%, that 20% of your time generates 80% of the results. So we've got to think about focus on those things that are going to drive that 80-20 law. So 20% of your time is going to generate 80%. So when I see people with a to-do list that they proudly show me of 25, 30 things, you know, for me, I generally try and get them to shorten that down to maybe 3 or 4 in terms of a must-do list rather than a to-do list. Think about it in terms of 80-20 law, Pareto analysis. If you're executing on a strategy and you're trying to think high level and you're trying to get your focus right, then sometimes I find that business leaders focus too low. We've got to go high level for our high level strategy thinking. So if you think about customers, processes, people, funding, you know, try and think about objectives and focus in, if you're thinking on it from a strategy point of view, as to those high level issues that are going to impact on there. So if it's about growth, is it about a big increase from sales from a new market segment or existing customers or overseas? If it's about process improvements, is it about a particular process? Is it about a new supplier? If it's about people, is it about recruiting or productivity or funding? What is it? So what we can do here is work with businesses when they're executing a strategy and say, well, actually the 3, because it's going to go 80-20 for this particular business, was their strategy involved a big increase in sales from a new segment. They needed a new supplier and they needed to recruit a new team. Those are the 3. They weren't trying to do everything. They were going to do those 3 things. One of the easiest and best bits of advice I can give you today is, first place to start is to narrow your focus. If you're thinking about executing yourself and you want a personal strategy because you want to get more done, or someone else, then take a read of The One Thing. Great book. The question that is at the center of the book is one that I'm certainly familiar with when I do workshops like this, where I say to people, oh, well, what are the 10 things you're going to do as a result of this workshop? And you go back and people haven't managed to do all 10. And you go, what are the 5 things you're going to do as a result of this workshop? And people haven't got time to do that. So I've resorted to using this. What's the one thing? One thing that you're going to do from this workshop, and you're going to do it well, and it's going to make a difference. And then we'll pick one more thing. What's the one thing? So the question that's at the center of this book, and if maybe you're struggling execution-wise yourself or someone else, answer this question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? What's the one thing I could do right now or this afternoon that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? You can tie in an objective into that, like, what's the one thing I can do for sales right now that by doing it makes, or what's the one thing I can do to help Bob deliver productivity? By doing it, everything else. What's the one thing? But it's just one thing, but you do it because that'll get the momentum and that'll get us going. And it's like 80-20, but on drugs. And because we've gone from the sort of 25 things I could do to the, oh, well, we're going to think 80-20. So now we're going 5 things. What I'm saying is go again. One thing. Just do one thing and do it well. And that'll give you the momentum to go through there. So we're narrowing our focus. The other thing about narrowing focus is to also just to think about in terms of how we articulate or curate that goal. So there's no point in having something that says, you know, grow sales. It's not particularly aspiring. It's also not very measurable. And we know measurability is really key for setting goals because that drives the strategy, the tactics that you need to do. So when we're thinking about narrowing our focus, yes, we want to narrow the focus to maybe 1, 2, or 3 goals, but we really want to make sure that we're defining those in the right way. So what we use there is something called start line, finish line, deadline. So I'm going to say something like generate turnover by winning new customers in health sectors from our start line, 0, to 500K by February, let's say. I'm using quite simple language as well, not a massive, long, elongated objective. Double sales of product X from 1 million to 2 million by March. Raise external funding from 0 to 500K by March. Develop new product offering from idea to ready to ship by December. So look at the way that I'm formulating these goals in a simple, easy to use way. Verb, noun, from what, to what, by when, or start line, finish line, and deadline. And if I was working with this particular business, for example, we were looking at actually trying to narrow the focus down from doing, instead of trying to do all these things, narrowed it down to these 3. And then the leader was in a position to talk to the staff, share it with the people in the team. Our strategy is dead simple this year, guys. 3 things, these things: generate turnover from health from 0 to 500K by Feb, raise external finance from 0 to 500K by March, and deliver new product from idea to ship by December 20th. That's the strategy. That's what people can focus on. So maybe yourself, think about it right now. Where are we at? Maybe you just want to just jot down what should be your wildly important goal for you or your business. Maybe just do 1, don't do 3. What is that wildly important goal for your business? Because if we can't define that, then the chances of execution are much lower. If you're helping someone to do this, very often on execution, when I interview people about, well, you know, your MD's had a word with me and we seem to be struggling with the execution, you know, what's the goal? What are we actually trying to achieve here? Very often, depressingly so, that person, it isn't clear to that person what they have been asked to do, let alone a from what, to what, by when. So what would be one goal you're trying to do this year? And maybe if you just jotted that down, just be clear from a strategic point of view that if you're saying yes to this particular one, maybe what you're saying no to. Because sometimes strategy, whether it's a personal strategy or a business strategy, is not so much about what you're saying yes to. It's more about the things you're saying no to and being aware of that and why you're saying that. What did Steve Jobs say? Innovation is about saying no 10,000 times. Discipline 2 is all about taking these lofty goals, these whats, into doable hows. How do we change that? And I'm going to share with you a couple of techniques on that, and you can pick which one works for you. Probably one of the best known ones at the moment is certainly something called OKRs, Objectives, Key Results. And this came, I guess the reason why it is quite famous is because it's the one that Google and other very successful online businesses use as a way of managing their business. It actually came originally from Intel and their growth strategy, and a chap called John Doerr put in his book called Measure What Matters, and he was involved with Larry Page and Sergey. And interestingly, there's a quote in the book that I really love where he says, you know, so when I explained what OKRs were, objectives and key results, and this system to a fairly young Larry and Sergey who created something called Google, he said, actually, they didn't jump all over it and say it's fantastic. I think it was Larry Page said, OKRs, well, we don't have any other way to manage this business at the moment, so we'll give it a go. They saw it as a way of, I guess, giving some structure to their goals and their strategies and their measurements. And obviously it did fairly well for them. And to this day, I've been to Google a few times, and it's still very much a key part of the business going forward. If you're an employee there, you'll have your own OKRs, and they'll be reviewed weekly and monthly, and you'll be asked to participate on that. So what are OKRs? So OKRs are objectives and key results. So our objectives are effectively our wildly important goals, if you like. we've narrowed the focus, but we're going to think about what are the objectives we're trying to do, the what's, if you like. And we don't just want sort of grow sales or improve productivity, or we want something aspirational, something that's time bound, and something that's going to grow the business forward moving. Generally speaking, quarterly. The hows are the key results, if you like. So these are the key results, are things that drive, the hows that drive the accomplishment of your what, your objective. And obviously, they've got to be very specific, measurable, quantifiable, and also we need to be able to grade whether you are doing it or not doing it, whether you are on track or not on track. And then finally, sitting below those are some plans, maybe weekly plans, Gantt charts or things like that to actually drive the accomplishment. These are the tactical things you're going to be doing over the month or the week or something like that. So OKRs are a framework for really driving the strategy, driving the execution by thinking about what's and how's and plans. And we review them weekly, monthly, quarterly. So here's just a very quick made up example of an OKR dashboard. We've got an objective there that's aspirational, that's time bound, that's going to be driving us forward, win the Monaco Grand Prix. We've got 3 key results, effectively our hows. We're going to win the Monaco Grand Prix by increasing our lap speed by 2%, reducing the pit stop errors by 30%, and practicing a simulator 3 hours a day. We've got traffic lights as to red, amber, green, as to whether we are on target, it's green. If it's about 70%, 99 to 70%-ish, there would be, say, amber, if that's about the progress we're making. Or if it's way off target, it's a red. So we red, amber, green it in that way. And you can see that on the key results, we've got a blend of quality and quantity measures there. So that's a very, very quick example of an OKR dashboard, what's and how's. An alternative way of looking at it is to just use what's and how's. And this is a process we use a lot. So we'll say to a business, we'll narrow their focus on all the things they could do and narrow their focus down into, let's say, 3 what's. So in this case, you'll see very measurable, you'll see time bound. So first what, if you like, the first objective, increase sales to hotel chains, 100K to 350 by April. Increase production capacity from 500 to 900 units per year by May. Raise 200K. So what we've got to think about those is, if these are the what's, what are the how's that sit below them that are going to drive that are going to help execute on those what's? So if we're going to increase sales, think about it. What drives sales? You know, if we were going to think about weight reduction, if that was a what for you, you want to lose 2 stone, what drives weight reduction? Well, maybe increase exercise, maybe reduce the amount of alcohol you drink, maybe reduce your calories in calorific intake in terms of food. So what drives sales for this is some high value inquiries, new range, better conversion, but they're all very measurable to align to the gap of 250K than our what. So each of these what's with the business, we developed some how's, very clear, very simple, very measurable, and we can hold people to account for them. Are we on target or not each month? And we can do that for our what's, in this case, in terms of to do with sales, production capacity, or investment, or anything else. So what I'm doing is thinking about the what, the high level goal that we've narrowed in, and then thinking about the things that drive successful execution of that. And I'm not gone for 10, I've only gone for 3, because I'm narrowing the focus of those as well. So think about it from your organization. Think about the what, maybe, or the problem that you had. Think about the goal that you described earlier. What are the hows? What will drive the successful execution? Just 3, or the key results, if you want to use OKR parlance. This is a very simple task, but in some ways a relatively complex one. Because if you can really successfully work out what your whats are, and you can really successfully work out the hows that are going to drive those, then to be honest, this strategy is on its way to becoming a successfully executed strategy. We can also put all these on one page. So this is what we call our single page plan. What we must do down the left-hand side, and then the hows for each of their color analysis. You can see aligned across the top, and we can put the targets down the bottom. We can look at what relationships some of those hows have on what's that they weren't chosen for, if you see what I mean. So I can show you that. If we have more time, we can go into more detail here, and we can put the red, amber, green on the bottom. So on one page there, one single page, I've got the whole strategy. I've got my what's, I've got my hows, I've got my who's going to do it, I've got my targets, and I've got my red, amber, green. Now, imagine if you had that at your board meeting or your monthly meeting or your weekly meeting with your team, knowing that we had what's and hows sorted, and we're holding people accountable for the red, amber, green performance along the bottom. And if we can get our what's and hows aligned, then what we can have is this thing called line of sight, particularly important for larger businesses. So if I'm the MD and I've got 3 what's, and let's say those 3 hows at the top, I'll give to Bob for the sake of argument, and Bob's the team leader, those 3 hows become his what's. And he might give those 3 hows that he's got, let's say on the top, maybe 3 of them might go to somebody called Sandra. So Sandra, they become her what's and hows. And if Sandra does what she's meant to do, and the other employees and the other team leaders do what they're meant to do with theirs, then we've got the whole business focused on achieving our wildly important goal for the business. Now that it might be a Gantt chart at the 3rd level or whatever, but it's important to line up everybody, to be clear to everybody in the business. This is what our strategy is. And then they'll play a role in executing it. 3rd discipline for today is complete a compelling dashboard featuring leading and lagging measures. So discipline number 1, narrow your focus. Discipline number 2 is set what's and hows. Discipline number 3 is a compelling dashboard with leading and lagging measures. So what do I mean by that? Well, we all know all these phrases. They're a bit cheesy, aren't they? How do you prove you're getting better? You might be getting worse. If you don't measure it, you can't control it. If you want people to disengage, don't keep score. What gets measured gets done. The one I like is without the facts, your opinion is as valid as anyone else's, which is true. So we've got to measure whether we're on target or not, or whether we're executing, whether we're doing what we said we'd do. The top right one's interesting. You want people to disengage, don't keep score. That's, by the way, that's the best way to demotivate people in your team or someone else. Don't keep score. It's, as somebody who plays tennis said, if we're not keeping score, then we're just practicing. So always keep score, not just because it's important to, but also to keep the team motivated. Because people don't come to work to screw up. Most people come to work to win and do a fair job. If you think about the dashboard of your car, you have things on your dashboard that tell you where you are at the moment, tell you and warn you about things that are happening with the car. So you've got on there, you've got dials that tell you what speed you're doing at the moment, what the temperature is at the moment, where you're, those sort of areas. But also, you've also got dials and lights on your car that come up that tell you that something might go wrong. So tell you that your oil pressure is actually reducing. And if you don't do something about it, the car's going to grind to a halt. Or maybe tells you or warns you and says that your air pressure in one of your tires is getting low or lower. So it's like warning you about the future, whilst at the same time telling you exactly where you're going at the moment. So a dashboard in everybody's car has leading and lagging measures. What does that mean? Well, lagging measures tells you what you've achieved. It reflects what's already happened. It's often reported too late, but it's relatively easy to set. So if you think about an average board meeting and somebody walks into the board meeting and says, what are this year's what's this month's sales figures, and they're not where they should be, then, you know, people can bang on the table all they like, but there's nothing anybody can do about it at that time. Or whether it's been customer complaints in that month, there's nothing anybody can do about it there, but we need to report it, but it's too late. It's already happened. Leading measures, however, are measures that help you predict what's likely to happen. So 2 weeks in the month, how many inquiries have we had for that sales? If we've got customer satisfaction levels and questionnaires that are telling us that people hate our products, then don't be surprised if the lagging measure at the end of the month also shows that customers have left. So leading measures predict and provide ourselves an opportunity to take action. They're a bit like the one in your dashboard in your car that's saying that the air pressure is getting a bit low and you might want to think about doing something about it. But he also tracks activities that have the highest leverage on your wildly important goal, but they are more difficult to set. So what I mean by that is, and here is a dashboard here with our wildly important goal on, we'll say. So increase revenue from corporate events from 170,000 to 280,000 by December. So from what to what by when? And you can see on the top there, we've got a monthly cumulative lagging measure. And below, we've got our lead measures. Now, interesting on this dashboard, we're covering off, we're focusing in on a really important area. So we've narrowed our focus. It's about generating more events. And you can see on the, if we go, say, in April, on the lagging measures, you can see that actually the target in blue on the top graph is showing that we actually are underperforming because the red line is quite a way below. Now, if we just look down at our lead measures, we've got 2 lead measures for this. One's about completing some quality site visits, and the other one is about upselling a bar package, a premium bar package to 70%. You can see that the lead measures were predicting this problem, this performance gap, months ago, or a month ago at least. And what's interesting here is if we collect lead measures, they're predictive. They tell us what's going to happen. So we need to focus on them. So you can see here that when we can see that the team here managed to get to the sorts of numbers they were meant to achieve. So in April, John and Nigel had 3 and 3 each, and Susan got to 2 and Lucy got to 2. And so we had 10 site visits. Well, not quite where we wanted to get to, but almost. And then in May, it improved a bit more. In June, it really picked up. July, it really did. That will predict that the lagging measures will improve. We are predicting. And it's the same with the bar package. You can see how they picked up in May and June. So I know in May that actually June and July figures are going to be going very strongly. I also know that with looking at those lead measures at the bottom, I could probably predict that August and September and October, certainly August and September, will also be strong months and achieving above target. So lead measures help you see into the future, but they are more difficult to set. So for example, if it was to do with sales, lagging measures would be something like the number of sales in the month. Can't do anything about it at the end of the month. That's where we're at. Lead measures for sales could be the amount in your pipeline, or how many proposals you did that week, or how many sales inquiries you generated on your digital marketing. If it's to do with productivity, that might be to do with, you know, at the end of the month, there'll be a productivity metric, but before the month, maybe there's something there about training of people on a particular machine or something like that, days training. If it's to do with, I don't know, pick something different, accidents at work, big one in the construction sector. At the end of the month, if we've had 3 fatal accidents at the end of the month, that's horrific. There's nothing we can do about it at the end of that month. Leading measures, maybe partway through the month, we should be looking and checking whether people, you know, the percentage of people who've actually, who understand the safety manual, or that are wearing protective clothing, or what percentage of that is. It's not perfect, but it gives us an idea of how things are going to turn out. And if we can create that into a dashboard like this, then it helps you as the leader to see how things are going to predict next month. What needs to change? What do we need to do to get us back on target and execute on this strategy? Do you think a dashboard similar, obviously tailored for your business, would be of use to you? Sure, we've got what's and how's, and that's great, but the dashboard tells us how we're doing, and it features leading and lagging measures, and we can make it public. We can put it up in the shop floor or in the canteen, or even maybe just as a poster or an exhibition board next to your desk to show people how we're doing across the key measures. Execution discipline number 4. So 1 was narrowly focus. 2 was develop lofty what's, but also convert them into how's, maybe using OKRs or maybe using what's and how's. 3rd one, it was about actually creating a dashboard that features leading and lagging indicators, so you can predict whether you're going to execute or not. 4th, executions discipline for today and final one is creating a culture of accountability with a regular, wildly important goal meeting. So what I found in doing these sort of projects is that culture in a business has a massive impact on people's ability to execute. Are people genuinely held accountable for doing what they said they'd do or not? In many businesses, they're not. So I'll say something like, well, this is the strategy, this is the plan, what's and how's, shall we do it? And, you get a bit of a, well, what's the point? This stuff, it'll make no difference anyway. Culture is how people behave when no one's looking. Is it a culture of accountability in your business? Or do you suffer from a culture of learned helplessness? Do people take initiative? If the plan is not on target, are people held accountable? They take initiative to get us back on track? Or is it a bit more like this?
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? Help! I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Okay, a bit of a joke, but think about you. Think about your team. Think about your business. You as leaders, are we actually feeding a culture of helplessness, learned helplessness? Or do we drive people? Think about it. When you're most motivated, when you've been at your best, your highest performance, it's not when you've been on easy street, when things are so simple to do, it's not really worth the effort. When you've been at your best, it's usually when you've been under a little bit of pressure, not loads, a little bit of pressure. It's been a challenge for you and you've risen to that challenge and you've done it. Fantastic, well done for you. But not when it's been made too easy. Do people have a culture of learned helplessness? Or are they the sort of people who, if we're off track and we're off the plan, they have the initiative to get us back on plan, do something more? I suppose the other point that I would make, it's quite a boring point to make, is culture of accountability. One of the things that we found really drives this is having meetings about what it is you're trying to execute on, whether that's with someone or whether it's a team. And that doesn't sound too groundbreaking, I know that. But for me, it's a truism that if you set a plan with what's and how's and all wonderful things like that, and then you leave it, and you don't ask how people are doing, or you don't lead on it, then it will suffer because of the whirlwind that's going on. So I would always say to you, set up a sort of a cadence of meetings weekly, I would say, but only 45 minutes. And the focus of that is to hold people accountable for taking the actions that they came up with at the previous meeting. The focus for that meeting is also the lead measures. Yes, we can talk about, and we have to talk about the lagging measures, but kind of they're not going to have much impact. There's nothing you can do about those lagging measures. You need to focus on what people are changing and doing on the lead measures. So I would say 45 minutes a day, 2 or 3 things I can do to impact on the lead measures. And people report on their commitments. They look at the scoreboard, the red, amber, greens, and your role is to clear the path, make new weekly commitments. But you hold people account. Not only you, but the whole team is mutually accountable for making it happen. The other final, I guess, sort of idea to throw in at this stage as well is maybe think about coaching-led culture. So involve more coaching in your culture. If you've got someone who is failing to deliver, sure, hold them accountable, absolutely, as long as in a fair way. But also maybe your role is that sort of player-coach role. Maybe they need some coaching. So if you're their leader, I see that as also your role as well. But what we do is in order to drive really, I guess, high growth projects and initiatives, we use this model called the loving boot. And I'll explain why we call it that in a second. But in essence, if you think about when you're coaching or having that conversation with someone who's maybe underperforming at the moment, let's say, and we want to drive execution, so we need them to do this, then I think part of the coaching conversation has to be around the challenge, challenging them about the technical issues associated to why the project isn't on where it should be, but maybe some of the emotional stuff as well. So we challenge them not only in terms of why is it not going, you know, what sort of things you need to improve about how you're delivering the project, but also with them. What are your worries or concerns? We can also look at support, technical and emotional support. So technical support is where you help them to come up with new ways of working or better ways of working to help improve the result. Or even, particularly at the moment with well-being where it is, emotional support, giving them that inspiration, lifting them up, saying, you know, you've got this, all those sort of areas. So we need both technical support, low and high, and we also need challenge. And when you actually put that onto a 2x2 matrix, what you get is, if you have a coaching conversation that is not very challenging for them, not really holding them to account, and is also not even supporting them technically or emotionally, what you get is just boredom. It's a boring conversation, and it's boring for you, it's boring for them. So there's no point. If we just support them technically and emotionally at a high level, but don't put any challenge into that conversation, then it's what we call the cozy club. It's a very nice, cozy conversation. Well done, you've worked really hard, that's fantastic. But if they're still below and not performing at the level we want the project to, you've got to put some challenge in there to get it from that just cozy conversation. What if we do put that challenge in there? So let's just say if we had a really challenging conversation with someone about the fact that they haven't done a particular part of the project, or they're not executing as well, a really high challenge in there, both technically and emotionally, we're really giving it, we're not supporting them at all, no support, then that just ends up in sometimes a fight in the car park, or certainly a very stressful or defensive situation. It doesn't do anybody any good. Sure, hold people to account, but as their coach, be prepared to support technically and emotionally. And then we get the sort of top right, which you call the loving boot. So what we found is that to get people to do difficult things, to execute on strategies that are not easy, then we need both a high amount of challenge and technical, emotional, but we also need high amounts of support in that conversation. So the questions we ask are very different to the questions we would ask in the other areas. But we need that to unlock that potential in that person, to help them be the best person they can be. So it's about having the right amount of challenge and the right amount of support to really give that best coaching conversation, to be that loving boot. Okay, those are the 4 disciplines. We talked about those 4. So the first discipline I said was narrow the focus to what's wildly important. Think about what you're trying to do or the person you're trying to help. Narrow that focus down. Convert lofty what's into doable hows. So whether you use OKRs or whether you use what's and hows diagrams, it doesn't matter basically, but it does matter that you've got to be able to help yourself or help someone else think about what the hows are. Just giving people objectives, in my experience, doesn't work. You've got to help them with the hows. Keep a compelling scoreboard. If we don't tell people the score, we'll demotivate them. But also you need to know whether we're on target or not weekly. And we can do that not just by lagging measures that tell us what we've achieved that week or that month, but also leading measures that predict where we might be. Finally, creating a culture of accountability. I said that culture is how people behave when you're not looking. Is there a culture of accountability in your business? If people say what they're going to do they do it? Do they get it back on track? So that is the end of our presentation today. It's just 2 o'clock. So I will, there's a question there about the slides. Yes, we will be, we're happy to share the slides and you can get a copy of the recording. I'm here also next week talking about the visioning orbit, a way of creating the 3-year vision for your business on one page. Very powerful tool. But I'm just noticing where we are on time. So we're at just 1 minute past 2, and I said I'd finish at 2. So I'll hand back to Lisa. Any other points, Lisa, that we should have mentioned as we get to an end of today's presentation?
No, I think we've covered everything in there. Just with the slides and the recordings, you will get them if you sign your AG3 and send it back to me. I do hold them to ransom. Apologies if you've all been scribbling busy. I should have asked that question at the start. So I'm going to add that onto my housekeeping to check with the presenter before, so that you all know that you don't have to scribble furiously through the record. So I do apologise for that one there. But yeah, I guess, Steve, if they've come up with any questions, I know we're wary of time now, but any questions, can they come to you or to us? Or?
Absolutely fine. Yeah, I'll pop my email address in the chat. The other thing to say, I suppose, also is that if you want us to rerun this workshop or this webinar, maybe in your business with your management team, pretty much the same thing, but obviously we could maybe take a bit more time and tailor it for you. Then give us a shout as well, because this may be something we could do in your team, and it's a really hot topic at the moment. We know everybody's really busy, but execution's still right at the top of the tree for most people. So if you're interested in me sort of repeating this in your sort of with your management team, then yeah, just give us a shout. I'll just drop my email address in the chat right now. Young.
That was excellent, Steve. Thanks very much for that.
Cool. Excellent stuff. Thank you.
You got time for one question?
Yeah, shoot. Shoot.
There's a lot in there, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, doing this
probably too much. Not focused enough.
doing this isn't easy. We all know that. So whose job? So you said, what's your job? Whose job is it to make this happen and drive this through? Is it a full-time job? Is it part of somebody's job? Who typically picks this up?
So I guess it depends on the organization, but ultimately it's the leader's job. And I mean that in a sort of a generic sense, in that kind of in some organizations, if you're a small organization, you're the leader, everybody's the leader. It's kind of, for me, if we're going to grow the business, and that isn't easy, it's very difficult. But if we are going to grow the business and be successful, then it's kind of everybody's job to have clear what's and how's and a dashboard and have that culture ingrained in them that I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. But ultimately, it's the leader's job. I guess if leadership is about getting stuff done through people, in a very crude definition there, getting stuff done through people. Yeah. Okay. So if that's leadership for you, then it's definitely the leader's role to drive execution. And that might mean some of that coaching role as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So just conscious of time. Thank you very much, everybody. Hopefully maybe see some of you guys next week for the visioning orbit session, which again is hopefully going to be as lively and as driven as this one as well. So I
just had a booking come through for that already while we were on here. Who was that?
It was me.
Oh, Sean, it was you. Oh, well, that's you now. You're giving me extra work to do now. I'm charging.
Excellent.
Right, just asked if anyone does want them, just to pop in quickly in the chat bit who wants the slides, or there we go, just so I know I can capture that then, to who wants the slides or the recordings there. Fabulous, thanks everyone. So hopefully we'll see some of you. Oh, we are coming through now, everyone wants it. You're in demand today, Steve.
That's all right.
Cool. So I'll send those out to you as soon as you send me back your AG3s, please. I'll hold them for ransom until then. I'll get that this afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully see you on the next one now with Steve next week. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you.
Thanks. Bye.